Hey everyone, welcome to the Bearded Heathen YouTube channel. Today I have guest Sprite with me. So without further ado, I will let her kind of introduce herself and then I will ask her some questions and we'll just kind of have a conversation from there. So, Sprite, if you can just give some of your background information.
Yeah, my name's Sprite. I live in Southern California. I work as a muse, an art model, photography model, pet sitter, jewelry maker, whatever. I actually have a bachelor's degree in sociology and psychology, really focusing on gender issues, sexuality, things of that nature. I've been an art model and muse mostly full-time for about 3 or so years. And I'm a super, super unconventional person. That's probably, if you know one thing about me, it's that I'm not anything that you think I would be if you thought of the social norms in this country. So I'm an odd one for sure.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
that's about me.
Okay, great. Well, so you make your living mostly with modeling. Is that
Yeah.
is that fair to say? Okay. Um,
Yes, so I work as a freelance model. I've been modeling in front of a camera since I was about 14. I'm almost 30 now, but I make the most of my money through art modeling, which is art modeling with artists or colleges in an artistic setting, mostly nude, but sometimes in costumes. But that's usually where I do most of my modeling, is not necessarily through like photography and advertising and magazines, but mostly like in art classes or workshops or in front of painters and sculptors and things like that.
okay, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know you. I think I found you because I think her username is still Kitty the Dork. I
Hmm.
think yeah. So I followed her. I was interested in her just because of all of her cosplay stuff. She does
It's great.
some very fantastic cosplays, and she plugged you in one of her things, so I started following you. Um, and I was really interested when you started posting things about kind of more personal subjects, and we'll kind of get into that later. But that's how I found you, and so you are on Instagram, Patreon. We can get some plugs out of the way if you'd like
Yeah,
to as
I
well.
do. So mostly it's I would say like 90% I'm on Instagram. I do have a Facebook page, though I don't really post on it very much because Facebook's pretty terrible. I do have Patreon, which is super fun, and have been known to dabble into Twitch. I haven't in a very long time, but I might be able to start doing that in the upcoming year. But Instagram is pretty much a foolproof way to find me. I post on that pretty regularly.
Okay, cool. All right, and so you said that you do art modeling for mostly for colleges and for classes, and you do some with costumes, some with clothing, and some nude. Can you just share uh, some experiences with that? I know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So I actually got into art modeling because I had a friend who was an artist, and I was at her house. We sometimes would have art days. I was at her house doing whatever it is that we were doing, and she was just bitching and moaning about how much she hated the art models that were in her class because they were so boring and they were just standing there and they didn't have interesting poses or dynamic poses or anything. And so she's like, Nicole, you really should do this because you're like a really animated, dynamic person. You know how to model. Like, I think this would be really good for you. And I don't know if I necessarily knew that it was nude. I had, like I said, been a photography model for many, many years, and I had made like a pretty strict rule for myself that I was never going to do nude photography because I really thought that I was going to be a teacher at some point in like my early 20s or 30s. And so I just really thought that in this society that we live in, it probably isn't smart for me to have any type of nude photography out if I want to teach children in any capacity because, like, we all know that that is a bad idea.
Yeah.
So for a long time, I was like, I'll never shoot nude, I'll never shoot nude, I'll never shoot nude. And I really didn't think about, I mean, I guess I knew, like, art modeling, but I just didn't ever really think it was anything comparable to nude photography because nude photography for me had always been like, ooh, this, like, sexy naked lady, where, like, art modeling, when I did it, it was the most unsexy experience ever. There's like nothing sexy about it. There's no this weird sexual tension. In fact, the first time I did it, I went there, I modeled, whatever, and of course I called my mom and she was like, okay, so, how was it? Were you like, how was it the first time? And I was like, It was pretty good. I mean, I got kind of uncomfortable, like my legs kind of hurt after a while, but that was about it. And she was like, no, I wasn't even talking about that. I was talking about the fact that you were naked. But I just like totally didn't even register because it just didn't feel like every other conception I had about being naked in front of people. And it really was like a pivotal point for me to start being like, oh, well, maybe naked modeling and being nude and showing the human form doesn't have to be sexual and isn't sexual and actually is art. And a big reason why I wanted to art model in the first place is because when I visited Italy, I looked at a lot of Renaissance art and the muses in that artwork, and I was just really, really inspired by them and just thought they were so beautiful and so romantic and so just revolutionary and amazing in what they were doing, and I wanted to do that, and so then here I was doing that, and yeah, it's been really great, but really liberating in a way that's like allowing me to love my body in a way that's not sexual, which in this day and age, in this society, as a woman, that kind of is implied that it goes hand in hand. So it was a really nice experience to be like, oh, no, wait, it doesn't have to at all. It could be completely separate. And so that was really cool and is really cool about art modeling, in my opinion.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah. I'm glad that you mentioned the Renaissance art because that was exactly where I was going to go. Because yeah, the human form in different cultures and different time periods, it hasn't always been as sexualized as it is now. So, and particularly with Renaissance art, you see a lot of it's just artistic. It has nothing to do with sex at all. And it's
Yeah.
great that people today are realizing that. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's also important to remember, like, in that time when people were commissioning nude women, there was a sense of sexuality in their intention, but I don't, and because, I mean, the women who posed in that time were prostitutes, but it wasn't because it was necessarily a sexual act, it was because those were literally the only women who were willing to be naked at that time for pay. And so even though maybe the artist's intention might have been to sexualize, or the person commissioning the artwork might have been the intention to sexualize, we now know that, like, hey, a nude woman in a museum framed like this and looking this way doesn't have to be sexualized. Even if at one point they were, that doesn't have to be the only perception we have of a woman's body. You know what I mean? I think that's what people need to remember and take away from Renaissance art is, like, the intention, you know? And I think that kind of goes back to, like, sexual art or sexual imagery in general, and people being able to distinguish what's sexual and what's not. Is a lot of it is intention. Like, if the intent is not to be sexual but to, you know, celebrate the human body, then it doesn't matter how many people find that image sexual, it's not going to be a sexual image. You know what I mean? But if the intent is to be a sexual image, then it's a sexual image. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
What about what would you say to people saying that art can be interpreted in multiple different ways, and it doesn't necessarily have to conform to what the intent was? Like, what if, like in studying a piece of music, I get certain imagery out of it instead of what the composer had in mind when they were composing it. Could you correlate that with the art world? If somebody views an image one way, are they necessarily right or wrong in their views, or do you think that we should try to get back to what the intent behind the artwork was in the first place?
No, I was actually just having this conversation not like 15 minutes ago about art and like who gets to consider what art is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And who, I think when you're looking at art and you're deciding is this art or is this not art, it's based on a person-to-person basis. So like if I look at art and I look at a piece of artwork and I go, that is art, then it's art. End of story.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It doesn't matter if the artist intended to be art. It didn't matter if someone wanted me to make it art or not. Like, if I perceive it as art, then it's art. If I perceive something not as art and I'm like, no, that's garbage, then it's garbage to me. To you, it might be the most beautiful thing on the planet. You know what I mean? But art is so subjective that you have to remember that, like, it doesn't matter what your intent at the end of the day. That's why, like, I don't make imagery intending to be sexual. But someone might see a picture of my foot and be like, oh my God, this is the sexiest foot I've ever seen. But like, does that make it a sexual image then? Like, if it's my knee, is that sexual? Okay, well, if it's like the underside of my breast, now is it sexual? Like, none of those things are sexual objects. I mean, those all have normal human functions outside of sex, but
Mm-hmm.
does someone interpret it sexual or not? And so, like, I think it can, once you get really, really deep into it, it kind of ends up at, it just depends on the person looking at it.
Okay.
Someone might look at my imagery and be like, that is the most sexual image I've ever seen in my whole life. And then I'll look at it and be like, but that's just my back. Like, oh, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? But it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. What they perceive is what they perceive, and that's all that really matters at the end of the day. It depending on what, you know. I like to think my intention for my art is enough for me,
Mm-hmm.
and that, you know, but it doesn't really mean anything. I get people all the time being like, your stuff is so sexual and so inappropriate. Okay, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it is. That wasn't my intent, but okay, you know what I mean? Everyone, you know, everyone's different. Everyone has different boundaries of what is acceptable or not acceptable, or beautiful or not beautiful, or art or not, you know what I mean? And it's kind of, at the end of the day, you just have to be okay with your own definitions of it.
Okay. Cool.
And surround yourself with people who kind of agree, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Well, cool. I was curious about that. Well, I know also that you are asexual, and
Mhm.
I know what that means, but if you could give your definition, since you have more experience than I do,
Totally.
just let us know what that means for you.
Yeah, so asexuality is like any other sexual orientation. I think when thinking about sexual orientations and sex in general, there's two things that are important to think about. It's the sexual attraction, like who you want to have sex with, right? And how often do you want to have sex? Those are two kind of separate things that combined make our sexuality. So who am I attracted to? Nobody. I've never really ever experienced sexual attraction where, like, when I look at someone and I'm like, oh my god, I'm so hot for them. Like, that's just never ever happened, ever. I'm still not 100% convinced it actually does happen. Hasn't for me. I can look at someone and be like, oh my god, that's a really beautiful person. Oh my god, that person's really aesthetically pleasing. But it's never like, oh my god, I'm so hot for that person. So, like, a heterosexual person is attracted to the opposite sex. Homosexual person is attracted to the same sex. An asexual person is attracted to no sex, nobody, nothing. You know, you're as sexually attracted to me as a chair. No offense, that's just the way it is. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I also happen to have a really low sex drive. My libido is just naturally very low, so I don't desire to have sex very much. That doesn't necessarily mean every asexual is like that. There can be people who are asexual who are very, like, sexual. They just don't want to attach it to anybody. They can handle it themselves. They don't need anybody's help from anybody else. But yeah, it's just kind of, I'm not attracted to anybody. I don't really want to have sex that often. And I think people get really tripped up because when they think about their own sexuality or their own experience of sex, a lot of people have a really hard time understanding, like, people can have sex with people they're not sexually attracted to, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's plenty of straight porn stars that are gay for pay.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean they're gay. They're still straight. They're having sex with the same gender, but that doesn't change their sexuality, who they're having sex with, right?
Yeah.
So asexual people can have sex just like anybody can have sex. It doesn't change who they're sexually attracted to, who gets their juices flowing, you know what I mean? And asexual people have sex for all different reasons. It feels great, whatever. They want to make their partner satisfied. They want to experiment. There's tons and tons of reasons. So, like, everybody's different. And I think that's true for any straight, homosexual, asexual person. Like, we're all on a spectrum, right? So, like, if you're straight, that doesn't mean you're sexually attracted to every single girl you look at. No, of course not.
Of
You have
course. Mm-hmm.
a type, right? So, that's kind of the same for everybody. And so I don't have any type of any kind. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But
Cool.
yeah, people, I think it's like, oh, well, then you just, like, choose not to have sex. Well, no, that's celibacy. That's a choice. Mine, what I go through is not a choice. I don't get to choose who I'm attracted to. I would choose something different. If I had a choice, it'd be so much easier, But I think it's important to remember for anybody, like, you can't choose your own sexual orientation, so no one else can. So if they have an orientation you don't necessarily understand, just know that like you don't have to understand it because it's not your orientation. You just have to accept that it, they know what they're talking about because they probably have figured it out or spent some time trying to figure it out. But yeah, so that's kind of like the basics, I would
Yeah.
say.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah, I've learned a little bit in that too. That's great.
Hopefully that
Um,
wasn't confusing or convoluted.
no, no. Well, it's not for me. Hopefully, it's not for anyone else out there. Yeah, I mean, the idea that sexuality is a spectrum and you can be, 100% heterosexual. You're only attracted to people of the opposite sex, and then you can be attracted to only people of the same sex. You can fall anywhere in that, percentage either way, and you can just not be on the spectrum at all and not attracted to anyone. And
Or you could be like, my friend Kitty, she's attracted to men, but she's very picky, so picky. And then I have other chick friends that are like, dude, if it has a dick and it moves, great. You know what I mean? Like, they don't fucking care.
yeah.
They do not care. If it's a penis, awesome. You know what I mean? And those are two straight people, and those are two completely different sexual experiences. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's it's not this black and white picture that I think so many of us get raised being taught. I mean, I know when I was growing up, I was taught that being gay was a sin that you could go to hell for. Now, of course, I don't believe any of that. But one of the lasting effects that that kind of thought process has is that people um, who aren't strictly heterosexual and wait until marriage, um, they live with this lifelong guilt of something that they're doing is wrong, and the people that are strictly heterosexual, they have this, you know, um, misguided notion that it's somehow some sort of a choice when sexuality is not a choice. I mean, um, the easiest way to demonstrate that is if you're talking to somebody who's straight, ask them if they can turn gay. No, of course
And then
not.
there's plenty of people who choose, make a conscious choice of like, look, men have done me wrong, or ladies have done me wrong, or whatever, and I'm making a choice to date and be with with the same gender. It's not my natural inclination, but I've been burned so many times, that's what I'm doing. And that's perfectly valid too.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? I think it's important to remember, like, it's all valid as long as that person is happy and healthy and not being hurt by it, then, like, fine. You know what I mean? It only should be a concern when someone's being forced or isn't happy, being
Hmm.
clearly unhealthy, their mental health is being compromised or whatever. Then that's the time to be like, okay, let's talk about what's going on. This might be a problem. But if the person's happy and content and fulfilled, then like, what what does it matter? That's what I never really understood is like,
Yeah.
what does it matter who I don't have sex with? Whose business is it but mine? Like,
Yeah.
I
I
don't.
I agree. I mean, it's the the only question that should be asked is everyone involved a consenting adult? If the answer is yes, then do whatever you want. If the answer is no, then we need to find a way to fix it. But
Right.
um,
And I'm glad you actually mentioned about like, couples that wait until marriage because I get questions all the time like, oh, well, if you're asexual and you're not having sex, then how can any of your relationships be legitimate relationships? And it's like, okay, there are plenty of people that have legitimate, fulfilled years long relationships and don't have sex until marriage. So does
mhm.
that mean their whole relationship was null and void because they weren't sleeping together? No, their relationship was completely legitimate, was completely as valid as everybody else's. Obviously, you can have a relationship without sex that's fulfilling.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's a difference between romance and sex. Why is that? Like, why is it confusing in any other context? You know what I mean? Like, that context makes total sense. Any other context? Whoop. If it's not for Jesus, I don't know what you're doing, man. I'm confused. It's like the same exact thing. I don't understand. Like, I
Yeah,
don't get it.
that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that before either. That's really good. Um, cool. Yeah, learning stuff that I wasn't expecting to. This is great. Um,
Sorry.
cool. Well, you brought up the point that you do still have romantic relationships even though you are asexual, which I understand, but I think since most people don't know about this topic, then that may catch some of them off guard. So, if you don't mind, could you describe what asexuality means for your relationships and what your relationships are like? How do you find fulfillment? I think the answer should be
Yeah.
obvious, but
Yeah,
if you don't
yeah,
mind.
yeah. Well, so I think it should be obvious that of course asexual people can have relationships just like heterosexual people can have relationships, just like homosexual people can have relationships. Like anybody can have a relationship. I mean, your friendships are relationships, right? Your family connections are relationships. So it really is defining, well, what relationship are you talking about? Are you talking about romantic relationships, the conventional boyfriend girlfriend kind of relationship? Well, sure, of course, because as we just spoke before, romance and sex don't have to be mutually exclusive. They don't have to be together all the time. You can have sex with no romance, as I'm sure many people know,
Mm-hmm.
and you can have romance with no sex. It really depends on the person and what they define a relationship as, and I think that really can be said about literally anybody and anything. Um, and I also think it's important to remember that things like intimacy and sex aren't the same thing, right? So we can have sex without intimacy. That I'm sure plenty of people can relate to that and have had sex without intimacy. And you can have intimacy without sex. I'm sure plenty of people have experienced that as well. So again, now we know that those are also two different things. So for me, a relationship includes, intimacy and romance. So again, none of those things include sex, so it doesn't really hinder my relationship at all. Now, for me personally, in my personal relationships, for about 9 or so years, have been dating someone who is a very, very sexual person. We were monogamous for 3 years. And after that 3 years, I really had just really understood my asexuality and was just kind of at a point where, like, I can't do this anymore. I can't sexually satisfy you anymore because it's making me just like want to kill myself. It's terrible. Just imagine and you wanting sex and not having it. How terrible does that feel? Well, it's the same feeling of not wanting to have sex and having it. Of course, I wanted to have it with him because I loved him and I wanted to satisfy him, but just it gets to a point where you're like, no, I don't like doing this. I don't want to do it anymore. So I kind of gave him a choice. We could either break up or we could stay together and open up our relationship and he could find somebody else to kind of maintain a sexual relationship with and satisfy those urges, because I didn't feel like it was fair for me to ask him to give up sex, just like it's not fair for him to ask me to partake in sex. So why would I be like, well, you can't have it if I don't want it? Like, that just didn't make sense to me. That was like, well, that's unhealthy and really controlling and weird. Like, that's probably not a good route to go. And so we kind of started an open relationship. And then after being open for a while, I've always kind of had emotional relationships with lots of people. Even when I was in high school and started dating, I would always like emotionally cheat with other people because I've just like to be intimate and close with lots of people. That's just always how I've been, and maybe that's just me compensating for my lack of sexual interest. I don't know. But our open relationship kind of just morphed into a polyamorous relationship, and I also started having a second partner who I've now been with for about 6 years. And so we kind of morphed into like a purely monogamous, confused relationship to an open, discussed relationship to a polyamorous relationship, and that worked really well for us. Again, because he's hypersexual and I'm asexual. Now, every asexual person isn't going to be in a polyamorous relationship or even a monogamous relationship or even any relationship. There's some aromantic, asexual people that, aromantic means they don't have romantic feelings for people. Asexual, they don't have sexual feelings. So those types of people might not necessarily want to have relationships at all. It really just depends on the person, and it kind of changes depending on what that person's needs are. But a polyamorous relationship satisfies all of the needs I have for relationships. So it's just kind of what stuck for me personally, and my partners.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, you bridge the gap between those two questions that I had for you. So, yeah. So
Yeah.
polyamory. So, I know I've got a friend of mine who is in a relationship with two women, and he has kids with them, and they all live together. So I have seen it, and it works great for them. They're in kind of a three
Like a
person
triad.
house. Yeah, yeah, and they all are all there together. I don't know the specifics of your situation. I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing that, but
Oh, yeah, sure, of
how
course.
did you bring up the conversation with your partner, and how did that go? Were there any bumps along the roads, or
Well, yeah. So, the partner I have now that I've been with for 9 years, we started our relationship. We were both pretty unhealthy. We really didn't know how to communicate at all, what young 20-year-old does. And so for the first couple years of our relationship was just kind of figuring out like who we were as people and what we wanted. And once I really understood like, okay, I'm asexual, there's nothing wrong with me, I don't have to wait for some magical cure, like this is just who I am and it's okay. I need to do something about this because I love this person and I want to maintain something with them, but I also need to be true to who I am. And I, growing up was always kind of that person that would kind of put my needs second to the people that I loved, and it just kind of got to the point where I just couldn't do that anymore. So first I just started talking about asexuality. Hey, this is what I identify with. This is a thing. Kind of started that way. We probably had 3 or 4 really big, long, couple-hour conversations over the course of about a year, just figuring out, hey, this is what my needs are, what I want. Hey, this is what his needs are, what he wants. Okay, maybe, I was always like, if I can't give it to you, find someone else who does. Why would I be jealous of someone who can give you something I don't want to give you? That was always my mentality, always. That's always been my mentality. So it took him a little bit to kind of be open to the idea of having other people because we've known each other since we were both very, very small. He kind of had always pined for me his whole life, and so when we got together, it was kind of like this, like, oh my God, you're this perfect person, and then come to find out, oh well, this is this one thing that we don't mesh well. Oh my God, now I have to refix in my mind that this is this perfect person that's going to fulfill every need for me, because that's just not the reality. And I think a lot of people have a hard time like realizing like you don't have to compromise and change the whole of who you are because you love someone. Like I love this person so much so that I was with them for years, being in a place that I really didn't like, but I loved them so much I wanted to be with them. And it took me a long time to realize like I can still be with them and I can still love them and not want to compromise, and that's okay. That doesn't make me like a bad girlfriend, because we're fed our whole lives you're going to find this one person and they're going to satisfy every bit for you, and if you're not, you got to fix yourself so you fit with them so you guys can be perfect together forever. And that's just not realistic. Like, we're really complicated, multifaceted creatures.
mm-hmm.
That's unrealistic, at least for me and my situation. So we took a good year talking about it, and he took a little bit more convincing, and he still sometimes will have a little bit of hang up, but like me, all three of us, me, him, and my other partner, like they're both friends, they're both bros, they hang out outside of me, like they get along. We have boundaries, obviously, that we've talked about and we follow so everyone's comfortable. Everyone has a different level of comfortability when it comes to like public affection or what we say in front of each other or what we do or how much details we give to each other about what we're doing and where we're going and whatever. And again, that's kind of different for every relationship. But it took about a good year and a half to kind of find where that was, which I think is healthy and good. Like you should spend time to really figure it out, because my philosophy is you want to have a good foundation and put the work up front, and then everything else is easy afterwards. You know what I mean? And it took us 3 years to finally get to that foundation, but now we have a really healthy and secure relationship because we've set that foundation and that openness and being willing to talk about what hurts us or what triggers us or what we're not comfortable with, because that's hard stuff to talk about. And you need to decide if you're willing to be with someone. You got to be comfortable enough to talk about that stuff. Otherwise, you're just not going to be satisfied in your life. You're not going to get what you want because you're not asking for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
That's
yeah.
Yeah, that's. I mean, you hear all the time, that communication is key for a solid relationship.
It's so hard,
And,
though.
yeah, and that's
So hard.
the
It's
drawback.
so much
Is
easier said than done.
not always
It's
easy
so
to
easy
do.
to be like, yeah, oh, just talk to them. But it's like, but when it's giving you like butterflies and your heart's beating and you're afraid of hurting their feelings or what's going to happen, or it's hard to break that threshold. But I would rather go through that little bit of discomfort than be where I was in the beginning of our relationship and just not happy and
Mm-hmm.
angry. You know what I mean? And so many people are just not happy and they don't know how to be happy because they don't even know that they can just say, hey, when you do this, it makes me feel like that. I don't like it when you do X, Y, Z. Could you do this instead? You know what I mean? Like, it's really that easy. And
Mm-hmm.
it might take them a couple times to get it, and you need to be aware of how many times it takes them to get it, because if it takes them 10, 15, 20 times to get it, then maybe you're not the right person. But you also need to give people, you know, that wiggle room. Like I said, that year and a half, we were figuring it out. It wasn't always rainbows and sunshines and great awesome things. It was sometimes frustration and confusion and, oh, I thought I was okay with this, but now it's happening and I'm not okay with it. But, you know, we were willing to go through that to now have a really, really secure relationship that's almost 10 years going. And we can see other people and talk about what we want and what we don't want. And it's no big deal.
Yeah,
So,
that's fantastic. I'm glad that you were able to get to a point where you could be that comfortable.
me too.
Yeah. So many people just have a
Just
problem
settled.
being honest with the people that are close to them, and that's the easiest way to make sure that you're going to live a miserable life, is to not be honest with the people that are around you that can do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great that you were able to find people that understood and you were able to work with them to make a relationship that's really solid. Um,
And you know, going into any new relationship that I find or have, or new people that I meet, I make a point to never mislead people about what my life is. So when they're like, "Oh, who's your partner?" I'll tell them, "Oh, Diego's great and William's great too." And they'll be like, "What?" And I'll be like, "Oh yeah, I have two partners." And I don't care who you are. I'm not, I mean, like, I literally went to my psychiatrist the other day and he was like, "You what?" You know what I mean? I was like, "Yeah, and I'm asexual and this is what it means and I'm going to fucking tell you about it, cuz like, what's the point of being shy about it? Like, I'm happy, they're happy. That's all that matters. That's,
mhm.
you know, gotta just be honest." I think so many people are afraid of like, "Oh, I'm gonna be judged, or what's someone gonna think?" And like, I don't know, growing up as an outcast, you just get to a point where you're like, people don't like me anyway. I'm just gonna have them not like me for who I actually am instead of not liking me for who I'm pretending to be, because like pretending is a lot of work.
Mhm.
Being genuine is so much easier.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, I can't say I understand it from the perspective of somebody who's actually gone through being outcast for their sexuality. Because, like I said, I'm a boring white heterosexual man, um, but I try to put myself in other people's shoes as much as I can to understand, you know, that to understand things from their perspectives. And I wish more people were able to do that. I mean, a lot of it around this area for sure comes from, well, it says that in the Bible that you can't do, certain of those
Ooh,
things. Whatever, name a thing that people do, and there's
for sure.
probably a
Yeah.
passage denying you the right to do that. So you're very open right now. You live in California. How has your experience with um, all of this? How has that been affected by where you live? Do you think? Is it easy? Do you think it's
I
easier in California than it might be in
oh
other
yeah.
places? Or
Oh yeah, I am really lucky to live in California. I've lived in California most of my life. I was born here. I lived when I was 18. I lived a month in Washington and a month in Kentucky. So I've lived a few other places, but for the most part, I've lived mostly in California. And California, because it's such a diverse culture here, because there's so many skin tones and orientations and languages and genders, it's really hard to pretend that that's not all over the place. You know what I mean? Like, there's few people that, more people than not don't know what asexuality is, but tons and tons of people do. Like, tons of people, if not know what asexuality is, they at least know what homosexuality is and accept that. You know what I mean? I just feel like it's a much more welcoming place. Now, when I lived in, like, Kentucky and Washington, I wasn't really aware of who I was and what was going on. I still was kind of fitting in a mold. So I can't really say, like, how my experience would be in those places because I really don't know. But I've really not experienced any true negativity or true people, like, being like, you're disgusting and you're burning in hell. Like, that never happens, ever. And I have a family that's, for the most part, pretty accepting. And I guess, like I said, I've always kind of been an outcast, not necessarily just because of my lifestyle or my sexual orientation, just in general. I just was kind of an outcast growing up, so I don't really notice it very much because there's just so many other people to relate to. And that's honestly why I'm so vocal on my social media about my asexuality, my polyamory, my whatever, and I don't shave, that I art model, that I whatever, is because when I was growing up, it was very hard for me to find people to relate to, which is why I felt broken for so long. Once I found the asexuality community and once I found that label for myself, I didn't feel bad or broken or misjudged or misunderstood. You know what I mean? It was only before I understood who I was that I felt confused and broken. And I think because I live in California, especially Southern California, in such an open and diverse place, that contributes to that. I feel like if I was in Georgia, for example, I might have been shamed even more than I was. All the shame I felt before I knew what asexuality was purely because of my society view, because of magazines and TV and all of that. It wasn't because of, like, where I lived. You know what I mean? I think it probably would have been way worse if I lived in a much more closed-minded space.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. When I started losing my religion, I mean, the word for what I am now is atheist, which just means I don't think that there's a God out there at all. And for such a long time, that was a dirty word. Atheists are the people that are out killing babies and
Have
worshiping
no moral.
Satan and all that kind of stuff. And there's just a lot of misconception out there for that word and for that community. People just don't understand it. I know that being in Southern California, you didn't experience much of that, but I'm sure that you experienced some. What do you do if somebody says something like, "Oh, you're asexual. You probably just haven't had good sex yet," or asexuality is a choice, and I don't know what a good example maybe of that, but
well,
I'm sure.
if someone was like, "Oh, well, you just haven't had good sex," I would be like, "Yeah, I have. Sex is great, especially good sex. Good sex is awesome. Pancakes are awesome, but I'm not going to throw a fit if I never eat pancakes again. I'll just go back to waffles." You know what I mean? Like, sex is great, but so is a good book. So is a really good movie. So is holding hands for the first time or listening to the rain or whatever. You know what I mean? So when people have, like, that type of mentality, I'm just like, okay, like, dick isn't going to change my mind. I've had great dick. It still doesn't change my mind. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I've heard it compared.
Kind of like this cocky mentality of, like, oh, well, I just assumed you had bad sex. And it's like, no, it doesn't, the thing about it is I just don't have that deep primal need or urge towards people. I just don't experience it. I wish I did. For a long time, I wish I did because I could just understand what people go through, because I genuinely don't. Like, I'll have girlfriends who are like, he's such an asshole, but the dick is so good. And I'm like, what? No. How is that a thing? But, like, that's a thing for some people, Mm-hmm. I think for me, just really being secure and confident in who I am really helps make those comments not really a thing. And honestly, I think because I exude so much confidence in myself and who I am, I really don't experience a lot of people. I'm also someone who's child free. So I get all the time, oh, well, you just need to wait till you get older. And it's like, well, I'm getting to 30, and that's still kind of the thing. So, like, oh, well, you just need to spend time with some good kids. I'm great with kids. I'm a camp counselor all the time. I'm a nanny. I spend time with children constantly. And what my favorite part of the day is? Giving them back. Always. Doesn't matter how cool the kid is. That's always how it is, Same with marriage. I really don't have any plans for marriage, even though me and my partner have been together for 9 years. And people, oh, well, that'll change. And like, okay, well, maybe aliens will fucking invade and I'll fucking get abducted. Like, who the fuck knows?
Yeah.
Right now, in this moment, this is how I feel, and no one's opinion on that really can change that, because, like, it has nothing to do with me. And they're just ignorant and clearly aren't listening to me. So why would I waste my breath anyway? You know what I mean? So many people think they know better, but they don't even know what they want. You know what I mean? They're just projecting on everybody else and not even realizing it. So, like, why am I even going to waste my breath?
That's a good way to look
Ain't
at
got
it.
time for that. I mean, if they're genuinely curious, fine. I'll answer all of the questions. But if it's all just like a ruse to try to make me figure out that I'm really not this way, it's like, trust me, I've been with myself for 29 years. Like, if I knew that there was any other manifestation of myself, trust me, I would know about it, because that's me. And I'm very confident in the fact that sexuality, like literally everything else, is fluid. I might wake up tomorrow and meet the man or woman that gets me off more than I've ever known before. And I'm open to that. It just literally hasn't happened yet. So until it does, this is the label that I feel fits me best, so I'm going to keep using it.
Yeah, that parallels my leaving religion kind of strikingly similarly. It's like, if you can demonstrate to me that what you're saying has merit, I'll evaluate that. But until something changes, I've looked at it, I've lived my life this way for this long, I don't see it. I don't see it changing. Yeah, that feels very similar.
Yeah.
Just regarding two different parts of
totally.
culture.
And I'm not like a terribly religious person myself. I'm definitely a spiritual person. I was raised in the Church of Religious Science, which a lot of people think is Scientology. It's not. A lot of people think it's Christian Science. It's not. We believe in medicine. One of the biggest core beliefs in religion that I was grown up or raised in was, like, do unto you as you believe. Treat people how you want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to pray to God, pray as if it's already happened. Thank God for this wonderful day I had. Like, just manifest what you want. The universe is there for you. It wants to give you what you want. You just got to manifest it. And I've kind of just, like, believed that and been raised in that. And I've had many, many experiences in my life that have cemented that in me. Now, do I think that that's a single, all-powerful God in the sky giving it to me? Absolutely not. I think it's a higher energy that we're all connected to, that's a non-physical energy that we all go back to. But it's not, it's in everything and everybody, all around, always. You know what I mean? It's not like this separate thing that's above us. But then that's just my personal belief. And the same thing with religion is, or belief systems or whatever, sexuality, gender, whatever. Like, if it works for you, great. You're the only person your faith and your belief system has to work for, literally.
Mm-hmm.
Literally. You know what I mean? And I think people forget that. They think, like, oh, well, this is my individual experience. It must be the whole universal experience. And it's like, no, bro. Calm down. Not the case. It's okay. Be different point of views. That's what makes the world so wonderful. Could you imagine if everyone thought the same thing and did the same thing and you had fucking oatmeal every day for every meal? It would be terrible.
Mm-hmm.
It'd
be
dreadful.
a boring way to live. Yeah.
It would. So I think people really should just be more open-minded, and you don't have to understand it and you don't have to believe it, but you just have to accept that it works for some people, and whatever that it is can be anything. It can be faith, it can be religion, it can be whether you're a minimalist versus a maximalist. Spoiler alert, I'm a maximalist. I like things. It doesn't matter. I think people get so hung up on, like, oh, my way's the right way, without really realizing, like, yeah, but for you, and I'm not you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it seems to be doctrinal. Like it's in the book that it says that this is the only right way to live, and everyone else that's doing things differently, they're going to go to hell, or they're going to be punished somewhere forever. Um, and so then they feel this compulsion to make everyone else think the same way that they do about that particular topic, and
Totally.
that's just that's unhealthy. That's not
Well,
taking people's
and
experiences
misses the
seriously.
whole point of, yeah, it also misses the whole point of like God should be the only one judging. So like why take it upon you to do God's job if that's really what you believe? Like,
Hmm. Yeah,
makes no sense.
I agree. It does not make sense. I mean, I
But I have a very religious father, so I understand people
yeah.
who are like, I'm not necessarily, I wouldn't call myself an atheist. I would call myself an agnostic because I don't necessarily believe in like a God, but I believe in a non-physical something, energy, spirit, whatever the fuck you want to call it, whatever makes us us while we're here on this physical plane that goes away when our physical form is done, whatever that is, has to be connected to everybody else. Like, that's just what makes sense in my brain. But like, I have a dad who's very like, Jesus is the son and your savior, and my soul will not rest until you accept him as your savior. And I'm like, bummer for your soul, bro. Like, not going to happen. And so like he's not really that involved in my life and knows a lot about my life because it's just not going to work out. So I just don't even bother. But like my mom, she's a much more spiritual, open person, so she knows all the details of my life, and I think that's important for people to know. Like, you get to choose how much of yourself you share with other people, whether it's your friends or your family or whatever. Like, I can still maintain a great relationship with my dad, just doesn't have to be all of me, you know what I mean? And that's okay.
Hmm.
It'd be better. I'd rather have a little bit than nothing at all, you know what I mean? So I just choose what to tell him and what not. I just don't really share about, like, I'm asexual. I'm not even going to bother to waste the energy because he's just not going to get it because he's a very, like, fox-watching, Bible-thumping, red-blooded American, you know what I mean? It's just a waste of energy. So I'm just not going to bother. And that's okay.
Hmm.
Not everybody has to understand you 100%.
Yeah, that's another good way to look at that. I know religion and sexuality has caused a lot of strife in my family. For me, it was religion based. For my sister, it was sexuality based, and it took a lot of conversations to get to where we could at least agree to disagree. I mean, there was a long time where my parents wouldn't let my sister's girlfriend in the house. They wouldn't let her over at all. This past Christmas, she shared Christmas with us. So
Oh, nice.
it's sometimes some things can get better with conversation um,
And time.
and time.
And
Yeah.
time. And
Um,
just being patient.
hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you have to kind of pick those battles because there's a lot of people out there who, if they shared that they were gay to their parents, they could get kicked out of the house.
Totally.
Same with losing your religion. If you say, "Hey, I'm an atheist," there's a lot of parents out there that would kick you out of the house. Um, I don't know if you know of any, but are there any places where people can go who are struggling with being asexual and whether or not they should come out to their parents or to their friends or stuff like that? Are there support groups anywhere that you've
Yeah.
personally
So there's a
experienced?
really good resource. It's called asexuality.org. At least last I checked, asexuality.org. And it's a great resource not only for asexual, but there's a lot of forums and information for people who are friends and family of those who are asexual and want to, just better understand. Which, I mean, at the end of the day, it's really just treat them exactly how you were treating them before you found out that they were asexual, because that's literally how much their sexuality has to do with you anyway, unless you're the person in their bed, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so asexuality.org is a resource I used a lot. It has a lot of statistics. 1% of people in the whole world are asexual, which when you think about it doesn't sound like it's so many, but it's like 60 million people, you know, the same statistic of people that have green eyes naturally, the same statistic of left-handed people, you know, so it's a significant amount of people, a lot more people than you really think. But yeah, that's the main, I would say the main resource that I used. And, you know, Google's really helpful. I just Googled, like, what is asexuality? I don't even know where I heard the term asexuality. I think it was a documentary, actually. And I was like, what is that? And like I said, I was a student. I studied gender and sexuality in college, and so it was like, what is this? And I watched it, and I was like, holy bananas, what is happening? This is me. How did I find this? So there's resources out there. The internet's a wonderful place. Utilize it. There's tons and tons of information at your fingertips, and support groups and people that are just like you. I mean, even on Instagram, you can look at the asexuality tag, and tons of things will come up. You know, we're in a day and age where anything is at your fingertips. Any relatable person is there waiting for you. You just have to find them. And asexuality is a great keyword to start with, you know.
Great. Yeah. Good. I know. I wasn't aware of any. I didn't do any research to try and find any, but yeah, it's good that there are places that people can go to find support when. Because I mean, it can be a shock to the system if you don't know anything about it, and
Totally.
or if you understand yourself well enough to know what it is, but you don't see that out in the world, so you think that you're
No, for sure.
you know, you're messed up somewhere, and
Yeah.
it's good to be able
Or
to
people
find.
think that there's something wrong with you, like for many years, probably from like 15, 14 to about 21, 22. I had no idea what the hell was going on, and I was very confused, and I thought that there was just something very wrong with me. And or alternatively, this is how it was, and people just never talked about how terrible it was all the time and how much you didn't want to do it, you know, because that's also a big narrative in this country. You know, my mom, for a long time, when I talked to her about asexuality, she was like, oh my gosh, all of my friends are asexual. None of them want to have sex with their husbands. I'm like, not wanting to have sex with a husband that you hate but you're still with because you can't afford to be alone is completely different than not being sexually attracted to someone. Like, those are completely different things. But someone who just sees not having sex is not having sex is not having sex, it's all the same no matter what, of course that's going to be the same thing, you know? So I think it's just important for people to realize that no matter how you are, really, it's somewhere on the spectrum of human experience, and I guarantee you there's someone else out there having that exact same experience. You know what I mean? And more likely than not, you're not broken and you're not fucked up or whatever. You just haven't found people who are your people and who understand you and have the same experience. You know, you think about way back when, you know, saints, like let's think about Joan of Arc, right? She was this beautiful saint. She had all these visions. No, really, she was just schizophrenic, right? She just had delusions, right? But like way back then, we didn't know what delusions were and what schizophrenia was. We really, you know, we thought that she was seeing God and angels and having this divine experience. And both of those things are right. It's just your interpretation. You know what I mean? She just fell somewhere on the human experience, and it's not sick or holy or any of that. It's just the way she experienced the world. Asexuality is the way I experience the world, you know? It's not going to be like everybody else, but it doesn't have to be. That's what makes the world so wonderful, is that we're all different.
Yeah, it makes it wonderful and interesting. One of the things that I always suggest to people is if you have any money to spend on something, spend it to travel. Go somewhere that you've never been and try to put yourself out of your comfort zone of your backyard. And
so fun.
yeah, absolutely.
Being surrounded by like a bunch of different languages that you don't understand, it really puts in perspective that like the American way in your daily life is not how everybody lives, not even how most people live.
Yeah.
Like,
America may be a big country, but it is not the whole world. So
no,
there's a lot
not
more
even
out there.
not even most of the world.
I mean, it doesn't take long to cross some borders. You can do it in a few days, no matter where you live, and there's a whole bunch of new experiences out there. And with the internet, it is now so much easier to find people who share your views and your experiences or have lived them before you've gotten to them, so they may be able to help you out with them. So
Totally.
yeah, it's really great to be a light. I'm glad that you're a light for people that
A
may be
beacon.
going through some tough times. Yeah.
Yeah,
um,
it's important for me. I grew up like very depressed, suicidal, whatever, because I really didn't have a lot of people to relate to. Like I said, I just felt like there was something wrong with me. And I just don't ever want anyone to ever feel like that, because like there's nothing wrong with anybody unless like you enjoy hurting and killing people or things. Then there's something wrong. Not a good thing. But
mhm.
like other than that, like just let people enjoy what they want to enjoy and be who they want to be and express themselves how they want to express themselves. And I want to like be there to show people like you can do that. It's okay. People
Mhm.
don't need permission, but if they feel like they do, like here it is. I'm giving you permission. You can be whoever you want, because like you only have one life. Don't waste it because some other person is committed to not understanding you, because there's always going to be someone like that. Like one of my favorite quotes is, you can be the juiciest peach in the whole world and someone's still going to hate peaches. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? So just be that peach and fuck them if they don't like it. I mean, don't fuck them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Consenting adults and all that. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you brought up the essentially a different wording of the golden rule earlier. Treat people how you want to be treated. Um, that's a great thing to live by. Another, I would think, slightly improved version would be treat people how they want to be treated. Because you know, I something that works for me may not work for somebody else, and if you understand how someone else wants to be treated, you have developed an understanding of that person, and that's always going to be better than not coming from an area of not understanding them. And with these, a little bit outside of normal viewpoints or belief systems or lacks of belief systems or um, the sexuality spectrum, falling on an extreme end of any of those things. It's not easy to find people out there who share those opinions, so, or whatever it is. um, it's good to have people out there that are being vocal about it. That's why I wanted to create this channel, was to be a little bit more vocal about it and to let people know that no, I'm not some evil crazy person. I just don't hold the beliefs that you do, and it's totally fine that that's the case. And
I mean, and honestly, like, if you have an atheist person, right, who's a very moral person, like, how much does it say about that person that they don't even need God to be a good person? Like,
yeah.
they can just be a good person on their own. And that's not to say that if you need God, you're bad. There are plenty of people that need really rigid boundaries in order to do what they want to do in life. And there's some people who don't. And as long
Hmm.
as you're not, I used to have a conversation with this. I had a boss who was very religious, and she was like, well, if there's no God, then how do you explain good and evil? And I was like, because good and evil is just a part of the world. It's a spectrum, and some of us fall on anywhere of that spectrum. And I don't think that you have to have a God to exist to implant that humanistic experience. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like, you don't
Yeah.
need God to explain that. A human can just be responsible for their own behavior and actually just be, it's them who are responsible. You know what I mean? And I think it says something about a person if they don't even have to have a looming lord over them to be a good, kind, contributing member of the world. You know what I mean? That should be celebrated, not chastised. Makes no
Yeah.
sense to me why that would be like a negative thing. Like if you were going around like literally drinking the blood of babies, like fine, okay, probably should find God.
Yeah,
But like if
just
you're
stop with
not,
that.
what, what's the problem?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I look at it is, I don't believe in an afterlife or anything like that. I believe that this is the life that I've got, and I want to make it the best one that I can, not just for me, but for anyone else out there that I can make it better for. And that's because I don't think that they're going to get rewarded in an afterlife or punished in an afterlife. I want them to have the best life that they can have, and I'll do what I can to make sure that that's the case. Um, I want to help feed people that are going hungry because I know that if they starve to death, then they're not going to get rewarded later. They're just going to starve to death, and that's terrible. I don't want anyone to suffer through that. And the same goes with any of the things that people get shamed for now, that are either things that they can't control or things that don't have any bearing on other people, like religion or lack thereof, or anything to do with the sexuality spectrum, or what you do for a living. Any of those kinds of things, like as long as you're enjoying your life, uh, if I can help you live a better life, then great. But I'm not gonna call anyone out for how they choose to live their life if they're happy. That doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
Um, and I want the world to be a little bit more understanding, and hopefully this will help. Yeah,
Hopefully. Hopefully.
yeah, hopefully.
If not, I mean, we tried.
We did, yeah, we did try. Um, yeah, I mean, I think I've gotten everything in that I wanted to ask about. Um, but just in case there are viewers out there, um, who want to find you, how can they find you on social media or wherever?
So, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, Instagram being my most active, I'm just the Spritely One, Thespritelyone. And yeah, that's where you can find me and watch me do my obnoxious life and be silly and yeah.
Okay, great. And you've also got a Patreon if they want to support you
I do, and it's the same
monetarily.
thing. It's
Same thing.
patreon.com/the Spritely One. Pretty much, if you want to find me on anything, look for the Spritely One, and if I'm not there under that name, I'm not there. Except LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is not really like a social media.
Yeah,
It is
I don't.
really.
I get invites from LinkedIn every once in a while, and I'm always like, do people actually use this? I don't. I've yet to see it get
I have
used.
one. I don't post on it. It's not
Hmm.
worthwhile finding. Find me on Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram, and I think
Patreon.
Instagram probably has your other links there as well.
Yeah, I'm
I
actually
think.
looking. I need to make a link tree, which I'm going to soon. Now that it's said verbally, I have to actually do it. But it should be linked to like my Ko-fi once I get that settled, and my Patreon, and my Twitter, and my Facebook, and anything else.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's you. If there are any people who are fans of you and are finding me for the first time, most of my videos are religion based, but I have a soft spot for people in the LGBT community, and I want to start doing more things that are not strictly religion based. And this is pretty much my first foray into that. So.
Very
Um,
cool. Well, I'm
yeah.
honored.
Thank you for being a part of this. Um, you can find me on YouTube as The Bearded Heathen. I'm also on Facebook. I don't post there very often unless I've got a new video coming out. But I am on Facebook as The Bearded Heathen as well. And then I have a Twitter. I mostly use that so that I can see what everyone else is doing. So don't go there expecting to
To
read
lurk.
any tweets or
That's
anything.
mine
Yeah,
too. I
it's not
very
it's
rarely post on it.
not gonna be worth your time. But yeah, thank you so much for being a part of this, and
Yeah.
yeah, and if you ever have any questions about anything in the future or want to have another conversation, I would always be down.
For sure.
But as it stands right now, I think we've had a very eye-opening conversation for a lot of people around here, including myself. I learned a lot of stuff tonight. So,
Yay! Yay!
great,
It's definitely my pleasure. So,
great. Well, thank you for being a part of this.
no problem.